You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Gold, crude oil, corn, soybeans, and more. With so many tradable products, the futures options market can be an intimidating place. How can you possibly keep track of the latest trading developments across so many different products? Don't worry, we've got you covered. Welcome to This Week in Futures Options, the program designed to help active futures options traders stay on top of this ever-changing marketplace. Each week, we'll break down the top trades, hot products, volatility explosions, and much more. This Week in Futures Options streams live, so be sure to check out our live stream via the Mixlr app. That's MIXLR. Or join our live chat room at mixlr.com/options-insider. Whether you're an experienced veteran or a newcomer looking to separate the wheat from the lean hogs, This Week in Futures Options has the information you can't find anywhere else. This Week in Futures Options is brought to you by CME Group, the world's leading and most diverse futures and options exchange. For more information and educational resources about futures options at CME Group, visit cmegroup.com/options. This Week in Futures Options is also brought to you by FTSE Russell, a leading global provider of benchmarks, analytics, and data solutions. For more information, please visit ftserussell.com, cboe.com, and cmegroup.com. And now, get ready to break down the latest futures options trading activity. It's time for This Week in Futures Options.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for TWIFO. This Week in Futures Options, the program where we do exactly what the name says. We break down the week that was, and indeed still is, on the futures options side of the fence. You never know what's going to make it on the show. Is it crypto? Is it energy, metals, ags, equities, all of the above? Who knows? That's why you got to tune in every week. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com. As well as, of course, from the ever-exciting, at least we think so, Options Insider Radio Network. Remember, so many different ways for you folks to get at us after the fact on pretty much every device and platform under the sun, including a lot of you like it on YouTube these days. It's available up there as well. Of course, you can get it live in your ear holes there through the Plus and indeed the Pro if you want to go beyond to get all the exclusive content that comes in there. Of course, however you listen live after the fact, keep hitting us up, sending those questions. We do love to hear from all of you folks out there. And let's see who we're hearing from on the program today. I'm pleased to be joined once again in the old CME hot seat by Mr. Tim McCourt, the Managing Director and Global Head of Equity Products over there at CME. Tim, welcome back to TWIFO, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Always good to be here.
It's been a little while since we had you on, all the way back on May 6th. Your appearances always seem to coincide with something cool happening at CME, Tim. I wonder how that works. The last time you were on, it was the launch of the micro Bitcoin futures. So I'm excited. That must mean you have some cool stuff up your sleeve for today, sir.
Absolutely. It's good to keep the cool things coming, and always great to develop new and innovative products. And, got lots of old and lots of new exciting things to talk about today. So looking forward to it.
All sorts of excitement, but let's kick it off the way we always do. It is time for the Movers and Shakers Report.
It's time to find out what's rallying on the light side and falling to the dark side at CME Group this week. It's time for the Movers and Shakers Report.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Movers and Shakers. I'm fired up. It sounds like Tim is fired up. You guys out there, looks like in the live chat in the Pro Secret Handshake Club are fired up as well. Nichols is excited for TWIFO. My boy Luigi, he's all in for TWIFO. I hear you. I'm excited too. Let's see what is popping off out there today. Of course, the Movers and Shakers, the portion of the show, listeners, where we break down everything that was moving to the upside, aka the light side, and to the dark side over there at CME this week. Mr. Tim, you know how we're going to kick things off, sir. Where should we begin our journey this week? To the light side or to the dark side?
You know, I'm feeling pretty good today, so let's start with the light side. You know, let's try and go for the lighter side of life.
You're channeling our old buddy Sean there. He was Mr. Lightside all the time. I know what you're doing, Tim. You can't fool me. You actually made a good choice this week because it's roughly 75% green on the report this week. So check it out. By the way, listeners, if you want to check this report out for yourselves prior to or during the show, the folks at CME usually tweet it out. I believe we tweet it out as well. So give them a follow. If you haven't already, CME Group on the old Twitters, you can see this report for yourselves. To the light side we go. It's a pretty active week to the upside. In fact, the Russell 2000 is up nearly 4%, and it's not even breaking into the top 5. It's only number 7 out there. So the actual top 5, number 5, you know, a product category we haven't been to in quite a while. This is dairy through the lens of Class 3 milk, up 4.15%. Before you get all excited, it's doing more paper than it used to. You know, dairy used to be a non-story from an options perspective. These days, that is starting to change. We have seen a lot of sustained volatility out there for quite some time, and that usually tends to draw some options paper to it. And that is the case, 5,500 contracts. So it's not nothing. It's certainly not Eurodollars or the E-mini, but it's also not nothing. I don't think we'll be hanging our hat out there this week, but it's good to see that dairy is coming on the radar. You know, people are always hitting us up asking about more esoteric areas they can explore for their options trading. I don't think dairy is there yet for those of you who want to dive in from your traditional equity options and kick things off in dairy, but it's becoming much more of an option story, and I'm glad to see that. Number 4, heating oil, up 4.31%. That one doing a little bit less paper, about 2,300 contracts out there. Number 3, the Eurodollars. You don't need me to tell you how much paper the Eurodollars do. Up 5.88%. It was number 5 in the same direction last week, up 7.4%. So Powell and the group over there at the Fed driving a lot of action over there in Eurodollars of late. Bitcoin, number 2. Perfect timing to have Tim on the show this week. Bitcoin, number 2, up 7.55%. And number 1 this week out in the energy sector is Nat Gas, up 10.78%. So a strong week for Nat Gas. And then we go to the dark side, listeners. Number 5, again, it's kind of hard to put together. We can probably do like maybe a bottom 8 if we stretched it. So not a lot of red on the screen this week, listeners. Number 5, so the bottom of our bottom 5 is soybean oil, off nearly 4%, 3.91%. Then we got RBOB, number 4, so trending in the other direction from the energies, off 4.16%. Of course, a lot going on with the hurricane impacting the refined part of the space. It was number 2 in the other direction last week, up 8.56%. Again, before you ask, it's around 5,000 contracts, so not the most active product out there, but again, doing some paper. Number 3, soybean meal, off 4.43%. Back to the ags now for the rest of the dark side. Number 2, corn, off 6.65%. And soybeans, number 1, off 6.84%. Virginia, I was on the show last week, did a great job breaking down all the action out there in the ags. If you're intrigued by all things ags, I encourage you, if you missed last week's episode, check it out. But before we roll into our reports for this week, Tim, the numbers hot off the presses for CME for August. We just broke down the numbers for OCC and for the equity space on Option Block earlier today. CME numbers coming in hot and heavy. It's that time of month, listeners. We're getting the numbers for August. An overall pretty good month. Volume up 7%. Again, it's August, listeners. This is usually the time when nobody's around, nobody's trading anything, and volume through the roof on OCC and volume strong over there at CME as well, up 7%. Some highlights, the E-mini Nasdaq ADV up 20%, equity index options ADV overall up 12%, and micro E-mini, just micros across the board, futures and options, representing 37.5% of overall equity index ADV. Also got some action on the micro WTI. They're about 3.5% of overall energy ADV. and micro Bitcoin futures. Going to get to all that in a second. Now, normally, Tim, this is the portion of the show where I'll toss to Derek. Derek's usually the guy who talks about the overall trends and options and things at CME. So you get to put on your Derek hat today, Tim. What are your thoughts on these numbers come out of CME? We'll get to the product highlights in a second, but your 10,000 foot thoughts, sir.
Yeah, I think the numbers for August seemingly speak for themselves, as traders continue to turn to CME to use their options on futures to manage their risk and access the market. But I think from my perspective, more from the equity lens, still a very strong August. As you were saying, it is August, the kind of doldrums of summer here, but I think coming off kind of the last 17, 18-month run we've had in 2020 and 2021, while August might have felt slower, still pretty good in the grand scheme of things in terms of volume, growth, still seeing great things. And I think if we look, this is probably one of the more active Augusts we've seen in a while. And I think this continues to speak to when you look at CME Group and the fact that you could trade options on futures on all of the major investable asset classes at one spot across energy, rates, FX, equity. It's something that we look to, and I think clients really appreciate it. And there's a lot of great stuff going on. And I always tell people, if you're not involved in options on futures yet, now is still the time to get involved and figure out how they fit your portfolio management.
Well, speaking of that, looks like we got our listeners. Luigi in the chat just says he just opened a futures account. So, Tim, we're luring people to the dark side as we speak, sir. More papers, more
real time,
real time, exactly,
real time.
Exactly. You're seeing the real time impact. But you're right. I'm always amazed when anything goes up in August, let alone these crazy numbers we're seeing now. I guess post March of last year, all your assumptions have gone out the window now. You can't assume anything anymore, but it is nuts to me as we're seeing these numbers in the literal dog days of summer, listeners. What does that mean for September? We shall see as we keep on rolling. I said Bitcoin was number 2 this week, up 7.55%. A little bit of action, some developments out there in the crypto landscape. Luckily, we got the guy to break it all down here on the show. So let's head out to crypto first.
It's time to explore the volatile world of Bitcoin, Ether, and more. It's time to talk about crypto.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the crypto segment where we do just that. We break down everything going on in the world of crypto. By the way, you guys know where to go to find the reports that we're using throughout the show, cmegroup.com/TWIFO, TWIFO, or /TWIO. Both of those should work. Both of those should get you to the TWIFO report out there. Again, that is all free. You can check it out whenever you want. It's live all week long, not just during the show. So if you want to run your cryptocurrency checkup at 2 a.m. on Saturday, it's there for you. If you want to find the cryptocurrencies, go into the drop down. You'll see ag first. Right below it, cryptocurrencies. So you're off to the races. And speaking of off to the races, Tim, everything small is enormous these days. Last time you guys were on, you were talking about the launch of micro Bitcoin futures. That was back on May 6th. It seems like you've put up a contract or two since then, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we look at micro Bitcoin, they've traded almost 2 million contracts, about 1.7 million total since launching in May. ADV of over 13,000 micro Bitcoin in the month of August. Since launch, we're averaging about 20,000 micro Bitcoin per day. So it remains a very popular contract. And I think this really speaks to when we look at the ability for CME to introduce smaller size, kind of right size contracts for the active traders out there, such that can be more precise in accessing the market, managing their risk. Micros really proved to be a useful tool. And off the back of micro Bitcoin and micro E-minis, and even the micro FX contracts that started all way back when, in 2009, CME did recently introduce 2 more contracts, micro crude and micro treasury, that are also off to a great start out of the gate with micro crude trading, I think, more than 2.2 million contracts since launching in July, and micro treasury, which is the yield-based contract in terms of how it's quoted, trading almost 150,000 total contracts since launching just last month in August, a few weeks ago. So micros continue to be a great success at CME. And, since their launch back in 2009, we've traded over 1 billion micro contracts across all the asset classes, where we have about almost 24 or so micro contracts. I mean, that's a huge number. Let that sink in. 1 billion contracts of micros trading at CME since launch. I mean, that's astounding.
That's a ridiculous number. I think at a certain point, Tim, we're going to have to rename it CME Micro Exchange. What do you think?
I don't know. That's a question for corporate comms, but I think they like CME Group as the brand for now. I mean, micro is one of the great things we offer. But I think it just speaks to the fact that, we have an almost 200-year history of serving the market and listening to clients. And micros are no exception. Our growing suite of micros responds directly to the demand for innovative, smaller size contracts, and they complement the rest of the existing deep liquid futures and options market. So it's really been a lot of fun. But I don't think we're going to be renaming the exchange anytime soon. But we'll see what our corporate comp folks have to say.
I'm just floating it out there. You never know. Just putting my feelers out there.
Well, if it happens, we'll have to get you your royalty on the
my standard cut.
So. Yeah, that's right.
I think 15% is reasonable. I'm not going to be greedy. At 15%, I can go with that for the licensing fee out there. I know I'm going to ask you, but instead, Tim, I'll let one of our listeners ask you. This is Meets with the Z, one of our pro listeners out there. He chimed in. He wants to know, since you're just talking about everything micro there, Tim, on the crypto front, he wants to know any updates from the folks at CME about micro Bitcoin options or a micro ETH product. That's interesting. He also wants to know what are your thoughts on the Ledger X. We'll deal with the Ledger X stuff on the crypto rundown next Monday. So we'll save that for you there, Meets. But I'm curious for you, Tim. The first part of his question, he wants to know any updates. Obviously, the last time you were on, you launched the micro underlying. So we're going to get the questions about the options and then also about a micro ETH, sir.
Yeah, so great question. We're continuing to look at that. And, one of the central tenets of my team and really the exchange's philosophy in general is that we should look to clients and the marketplace for ideas. We've certainly been hearing more requests around micro Bitcoin options. It's not something we're committed to yet, but we're continuing to validate the idea, look at it, engage with customers, figure out how it might fit in, and would it provide the same type of benefits that we saw the micro futures for Bitcoin provide. Options, as everyone knows, they're a little bit trickier sometimes because it's just a bigger use of technology and bandwidth. And one of the things we're really just engaging with customers and market makers on right now is there room for two sides options out there? We want to make sure that it's helpful. A lot of people are asking for it. We hear all the listeners loud and clear. No plans yet, but we're still evaluating it. And same thing for micro Ether. I mean, it's crazy to think that Ether is only a few months old, doing 4,000 plus contracts last month in August, and people can't get it up. They want the micro Ether contract. We hear that loud and clear as well. But same thing, we want to make sure that the market structure in the existing contract really takes root, and we're continuing to evaluate the need for a smaller size contract. But it is something we're hearing more and more, especially when you look at the premise for our micro size contracts, where if the asset value is just rising, Bitcoin went from 8,000 when we announced it to 50 to 60,000 when we introduced the micro. Ether was a few $100s per ETH when we announced the futures contract, and now it's trading at $3,700, $3,800 per ETH. So, certainly the premise is there. I think the idea is a good one, but we're just continuing to validate it with the marketplace to see if it makes sense. So stay tuned, and I gotta save some dry powder for my next appearances on TWIFO and whatnot.
Yeah, otherwise,
can't telegraph it too much.
Yeah, you can't burn it all in one appearance, then you won't get to come back on. But let me put my hat in for the micro ETH. Isn't that crazy that we need a micro ETH already? It was just like $400 not that long ago. But yeah, here we are, threatening with, I think I haven't checked it today where it is, but it's been somewhere close to that 4,000 range for a while now. So put my hat in for a micro ETH out there as well. That would be certainly interesting. By the way, Meets, my keen-eared producer, caught something. I said we'll answer the second part of your question on Monday's Crypto Rundown. I forgot Monday is the Labor Day holiday, so there will be no Crypto Rundown. So lest my producers get mad at me, it'll be on the subsequent Crypto Rundown, unless we could sneak it in maybe somewhere else over there. So there you go. Now my producers won't get mad at me out here. I would love to come in and parse speaking of options, Tim, we're starting to see more. We're starting to see days where you're seeing 100 odd some days on the big Bitcoin options. Obviously, that's still a pretty beefy product. You're talking a 5-coin contract. So that's really not for the faint of heart to tread into those waters. But what kind of trends are you seeing? Anything encouraging on the big Bitcoin front from an options perspective?
Yeah, I think just kind of continued growth and adoption, from our perspective, the exchange, more customers are looking at them. But to your point, I think one of the product features we are trying to address is the size. And, that's why I think so many people are asking about micro Bitcoin options, and we'll continue to take a look at it. We're also looking at things, just more on the technical side of the offering, where, we just put it out this morning. We're looking at trimming some of the strike array around the large Bitcoin options, moving it more to 1,000-point interval strikes versus some of the 100. And some of that is just cleanup on our side from the exchange. When we first introduced these options, Bitcoin was not 50,000 per coin. So the granularity we had around the strikes made more sense. We're looking just to kind of space that out, maybe concentrate some more liquidity provision around the 1,000-point intervals, given the current price of Bitcoin. So we're continuing to fine tune it. Options are challenging markets to develop, and we're off to a good start, but we'd like to see it grow further. And I think just including some of this feedback around the strike granularity and concentrating the liquidity provision will help clean up the array a little bit. And then we're just continuing to tackle the size issue, as you pointed out, engaging with market makers and market participants. So just encourage people to keep the feedback coming. The market and the clients are always right. So we're trying to listen to you guys out there to figure out how we can make this more suitable for your trading needs. But pleased so far with where we've gotten thus far on the Bitcoin options.
Well, let's look really quickly at the big Bitcoin options. You guys are always asking us for a volume and a volatility and a skew breakdown. You can go to these for yourselves. Like I said, go to the drop down, the cryptocurrency tab. You can see for yourself exactly what's lighting it up. What paper there is, not a ton, what paper there is, 95% of it coming in that SEP contract. That is, by the way, the Bitcoin coming at showtime at about a 49,405 out there. And if you're wondering vol-wise, again, people had questions. We did that poll recently about what's more volatile, Tesla or VIX or Bitcoin. A lot of you half of you exactly chose Bitcoin. Bitcoin vol coming in right now at about an 83.5. VVIX, you listened to the option block a little while ago. We'll hear it again in a few minutes. Is still north of triple digits. So for all of you who had questions about why VIX could win that one, that's why. And let's see. So 83.5 right now, up about a point. And in terms of skew, usually we see the calls pretty demonstrably bid. Again, there's some light volume here, so read into that a little bit. But still, the puts last week on the SEP Bitcoin contract, about 1% bid to the at the money this week have come in mostly to flat. They're about a quarter of a percent rich. Last week, the calls 2.6% rich. This week, they've come in as well, only 1.6% rich. And in terms of where the action was, it was an interesting strike. It was the 28,500 put that led the dance out there this week with, again, nearly 50 of those, which is a lot for a 5X contract. Interesting stuff afoot there. Is that you out there trading the 28,500 puts? Let us know, listeners. Intriguing stuff. Before we roll out of Bitcoin and crypto, though, Tim, like I said, you always have good timing. You guys announcing new stuff right before you came on the show out there today, including these new BTIC products. So why don't you get listeners up to speed? What the heck is BTIC and what are you guys doing with it in crypto, sir?
Absolutely. So BTIC stands for Basis Trade at Index Close. It's a feature that we've introduced in the equity index complex a few years ago and has been very successful. It is quoted in basis terms, or the spread between the future and the underlying index or associated spot or cash market. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to explicitly trade the basis of that market against the cash index. And then at the end of the day, you get the futures contract. So what that means for cryptocurrencies, we're introducing BTIC contracts on September 25th on the 5X Bitcoin, BTC, the 0.1X Bitcoin, the micro Bitcoin, MBT, and ETH futures at CME. So BTIC on 3 cryptocurrency futures. And what that contract will allow you to do starting on Monday, September 27th, will be to trade the basis of the future to the underlying CME CF benchmark reference rate. So we got the Bitcoin reference rate, the BRR, the Ether US dollar reference rate. So all day long, you could trade the basis. So for argument's sake, let's just say it's +1 index point. You could trade the BTIC at +1. And then when the BRR or Ether comes out at 11 a.m. Eastern, you add the +1 basis to that day's index observation, the daily reference rate fixing price, and then you take or make delivery of that future for that day at that net price. So what that does is it gives you the effective official cash reference point in futures form. So you can trade against the cash level, but enjoy all the benefits of futures. And I think for cryptocurrency, the thing that I'm really excited about is the basis market in crypto continues to become something that folks are looking at, they're trading, they're deploying strategies around, and this will now allow you to explicitly trade the basis throughout the day. In terms of just trading the outright futures contract, you can trade the basis. And then if you still have a position going into the 11 a.m. Eastern print, then you'll take the futures at that basis that you traded, or you can trade the basis intraday and get out flat before the reference rate print. So it's a really useful tool for cryptocurrency. We're super excited because it combines two innovations that have been successful in their own right: BTIC contracts at CME and crypto contracts at CME. So we're really hoping the sum of the parts is going to be greater to the whole with this one, combining two fantastic innovations from recent years now into one contract.
There you go. BTIC. Check it out for yourselves, listeners. BTIC. Big tweet about it. CME just put out right before the show. You could see it there. You can find it on the website there as well. If you're intrigued, you want more options, pun intended, for things to trade out there on crypto at CME, they're coming soon. Speaking of coming soon, we got to keep on rolling with the show into other segments that are pretty active these days. Let's head on out into the realm of equities and volatility next.
It's time to explore the volatility swings, skew changes, and hot options trades in your favorite indices. It's time to talk equities.
All right, everybody, welcome to the equities, the portion of the show where we break down everything going on in the complex that a lot of you like to sink your teeth into these days. You know where to go if you want to find all this for yourselves, listeners. Go back to that drop down, get out of the cryptocurrencies, and you'll see it a few notches below there. You'll see equity indices. And perhaps because Tim's on, we'll dive into his big boy first, which is the S&P E-mini. So go into the ES drop down. By the way, before we get into all that, let's set the table from a vol perspective. It's kind of hard to talk equities without talking the other side of that coin, which is volatility. And a couple of weeks ago, we had RVX, which is the VIX of the Russell 2000, the small cap VIX, hit at about a 30. We thought, is this going to hang out here for a while? We're going to see it trending in the other direction. So far, the answer has been the latter, trending in the other direction. RVX coming into showtime just a tick under the 24 level. That's down about 1.5 points from where it was last week, and obviously down about 6 points from where it was a couple of weeks ago. So small cap vol coming in aggressively, pretty much equity vol across the board ever since Powell last Friday has really been coming in pretty aggressively. The VIX coming into showtime actually getting a little bit back. It was trading at a 15 handle, the VIX cash, earlier this week. Coming into showtime at about a 16.5. It seemed like maybe some of that worm was turning a little bit out there in the broad markets. Looks like it has turned back to the green again today. But Nasdaq, I do believe, dipped into the red ever so briefly today. 16.5 VIX cash when we kicked off the show. That's still down almost 1 2/3 points from this time last week. VVIX, the vol of vol. Remember, I just said Bitcoin vol is at about an 85, listeners. VVIX at about a 105 2/3. That puts it down nearly 9 points from last show, but still in the triple digits. So again, everyone asking about why it's so volatile or why it beat Bitcoin. That's why. And then VOLQ, which is the at-the-money vol of the Nasdaq-100, also the newest tradable vol product over there at CME land, back into about a 16 handle. That's pretty much unched from where it was this time last week. It had been flirting with a 15 handle for a little while there. That puts that VIX to RVX spread, so that large cap to small cap vol spread, at about 7.5 points. That's pretty much unched from this time last week. And VIX to VOLQ at about 0.5 point. That's almost unched as well. Remember, we had Scott Nations, the creator of VOLQ, on our Pro Q&A last week. He's saying, keep an eye on that VIX to VOLQ spread because it's at some historically interesting range right now. And it hasn't moved from last week. So keep an eye on that NASDAQ to S&P 500 vol spread. And Tim, you're just talking about everything micro out there in the Bitcoin complex. I was only half joking about the CME micro exchange, but we have a similar story to tell here in equities as well. Micro's kind of blowing the doors off. What's blowing it up in the small side of the space in equities these days, sir?
Micros continue to be of great benefit to the marketplace. When we look at the equities, we were talking earlier how 1 billion contracts have traded, or 1 billion plus contracts have traded. Almost 900 million of that is micro E-mini contracts. So they remain extremely popular. When we look at the 2021 volumes for micro E-minis, we're talking over 362 million micro contracts in equities for the first 8 months of this year alone. So all things small or big, right, in terms of micro contracts at CME, And I think this really speaks to, why this has been for equities the most successful product launch in CME Group's history. Is it really hits the sweet spot for those retail traders that want to take action into their own hands and be responsible for their trading decisions and want to scale up or scale down throughout the day, or want to maybe dip their toe into the water and don't want to trade the older sibling E-mini contracts. It's also why we launched micro E-mini options. We're off to a great start. And when we look at WTI, which are micro WTI or cash settled based on the daily settlement price of our benchmark WTI futures, that's 1/10 of their older sibling. Same thing with micro treasury. It's based on yield for the on the run treasuries, the 2, 5, 10, and 30-year maturities priced at $10 per basis point. These are all things that the traders want, and they want more of, and they can't get enough. But it's not just the micros at CME. We also introduced Monday and Wednesday Nasdaq options just a few weeks ago. They've already traded over 500,000 since launch. So these are just all, I think the overall theme, regardless if it's micro or kind of classic E-mini size, is traders out there want more tools in the toolbox, and CME is the place to trade. We have all the investable asset classes, options, futures, various order types. So it's really something for everybody, and I think that's what we're continuing to see here. And equities is certainly, I think, leading the way on the micro front, as well as the futures front for E-minis, their older E-mini siblings as well.
All right, let's break it down. Since you're on, Tim, talking about micros, we haven't really broken down the micro options activity on products like the S&P. So let's start there now. It's kind of interesting. Actually doing some paper this week, about 17, almost 18,000 contracts on the tape already. Now, obviously, that's a micro contract, so adjust that for the notional size. But still, that's rolling out there a little bit. In terms of the action, like a traditional equity, 35% of that paper is going away in the tomorrow. People in the equities, they live in the weeklies. That's just kind of the way the product is these days. So instead, let's roll out a little bit farther. Let's go out to this SEP contract that still has, looks like, about 14 days to go. That's right at our cutoff, listeners. And that's, let's see, by the way, S&P coming at showtime at about a 45.32, up about 0.6% on the week out here. In terms of vol, you're looking again, S&P vol. S&P has not been that volatile of late. One of the reasons why vol is trending in on the equities across the board. We're looking at about a 10 right now in that SEP contract, listeners. So yeah, you're talking like, longer term rates vol kind of at this point. That's a good argument for maybe VIX is still a little overpriced at these levels out there. In terms of skew, again, everyone's got puts on the brain these days, and that continues to be the case. 26.2% rich were the puts last week. This week, 33, almost 34% rich. So again, some of that is, of course, the fact that we're starting from a very low overall level of around 10, but still, that's a 34% bid. That's a hefty put skew out there, listeners. And that not just in the big E-mini, we're seeing that in the micros as well. In terms of the calls, 15.7% cheap last week. This week, getting cheaper, nearly 19%, 18.8% to be precise out there. And in terms of where the action was this week, I said we're at about a 45.32. No surprise, it's the 4,500 puts going out tomorrow that are the most active pretty much across the board out here. It's like 4,500 puts going out next week, so about 8 days. Also pretty active out here. So 4,500 puts pretty much across the board in the micros are where the action was this week. Let's also take a quick sojourn out there into small caps as well. Go back to that drop down, listeners. Go up to E-mini and go down to the Russell 2000. That's where you'll find our action out there. Like I said, it just barely managed to fall outside of our top 5 this week. Still doing some decent paper out there. 2,300 almost exactly is where the Russell 2000 is coming into showtime. And again, like any other equity product, the SEP contract going away in a day, that has about almost half, 47.4% of the paper. We've got to go all the way out. We've got to go all the way out to the contract that's expiring in about 15 days to get a product that did about 20%. So I still did some paper out there. Again, vol-wise, more vol, traditionally just structurally more volatile always in the small cap. So you're talking about a 17.6. That's off about a point this week. But again, compared to a almost 10, small caps still looking more volatile out there, which probably is one of the accounts for why so many people are paying attention to them these days. If you're looking for equity volatility, That's one of the places you kind of have to look by default. In terms of skew, last week the puts were 13.5% bid. This week, getting more bid, 18.4%. So catching almost 5-point swing out there on the puts. The calls last week, 9.2% cheap. This week, nearly 13% cheap, 12.9% to be precise. So puts getting bid up, calls getting offered. That's kind of what we've been seeing across the board. In the equities, I said we're at about a 2,300 exactly. No surprise then that it was 2280 calls going out tomorrow, leading the dance, pretty active throughout the week. We go a little bit farther out to the contract expiring in about 2 weeks. Again, people are always asking about small delta calls. We didn't quite see those. We saw at the monies actually again, 2300s be leading the dance out here in the 2 week to go contract. We saw a little bit smaller delta stuff, 2500s going out at the end of month SEP contract. That did a little bit of paper. We don't see a ton of what we usually see, which are the far out of the money puts. Not a lot of those this week. It looks like 2190 puts and closer puts are kind of where the action is there this week. So a little bit of a breakdown of everything going on out there in small cap land. I'll let you, Tim, as our guest. We kind of touched on equities. We touched on crypto, your two bailiwicks out there. We got a little bit of time before we bring on the listeners. What other products would you like to discuss on the show this week, sir?
Oh, I don't know. It's always tough. I mean, I like to say equities and crypto are my favorite, but there are some other things out there. Mark, I'm going to say whatever you want to go. I'm flexible here in the hot seat. You're the captain. I'm the co-pilot. So wherever you want to go, let's go for it. Dealer's
choice. Well, our dark side, as limited as it is, there isn't a lot of dark side this week. But what dark side there is, listeners, is pretty much all ags all the time. Soybeans, corn, soybean meal, and soybean oil. 4 of the bottom 5. So just in honor of our guest last week, Virginia, I think we have to hang our hats out there next.
It's time to get our hands dirty exploring the latest options, trades, and trends in corn, wheat, soybeans, and more. It's time to talk ags.
All right, welcome to the world of ags. Like the man said, this is where we get our hands dirty. The number one dark side mover this week was soybeans, off nearly 7%. So we're going to hang our hat out there next, listeners. In terms of action, where you can find this, again, it's all alphabetical here, so agriculture is the top of the drop downs there. Then go over to grains and oil seeds, and then go down to soybeans. And you can find this for yourselves. In terms of where we are right now, 1282.25 on that front future. That's off 41 points exactly, or 3.1% on the week. And unlike the equities, exactly 50% of the paper went up in the November contract that looks like about almost exactly 50 days to go. So again, ags kind of move to the beat of their own drummer. They don't just all hang out in the weeklies the way the equities do these days, which makes them a little bit more interesting to parse because you never know what you're going to get out there. Equities, I can know with a great degree of certainty that at least probably a third of the paper is going to be in some weekly that's going away tomorrow. So a little bit of a different story out here in the ags. And in terms of, 50% coming in the November contract out here. By the way, if you're wondering, since the beginning of this week, soybeans off 3.1% or 41 handles here. So again, a lot of that sell off this week, and then a good chunk also happening after our show last week, which brings it to the close to 7% to the dark side, which puts it at the top of our dark side movers for this week. We have to go out though to the October contract again. That has about almost 50 days to go. The vol out there, again, everyone who's kind of wringing their hands about equity vol, S&P vol is at about a 10. Small cap vol at about a 17.5. You say you need a little more? Well, soybeans may have you covered. 21.5 on the November contract, up about 1.5 points this week. So getting a little bit more juice this week in terms of the skew. The puts last week, 1.8% cheap. This week, nearly 4% cheap. 10.8% rich were the calls. Last week, calls coming in this week down to 5.5% bid. And in terms of the most active contract, what were you folks trading out here? I said we're at about a 1282 coming into showtime. It was the 1200 even puts trading pretty actively out here in November all week long, doing a total of about 10,000. By the way, if you're wondering how much paper the soybeans do, about exactly 200,000 contracts on the tape this week, listeners. And of that, about 10,000 coming on these 1200 puts. Again, the big day was Tuesday, nearly 5,000, 49.90 on Tuesday, 2,000 on Wednesday, and about 1,500 on Monday, about 1,000 today. Pretty much opening every day this week. So a lot of opening 1,200 put paper in November. Again, we're trending downward right now, so not entirely shocking out there, but intriguing nonetheless. And then we drop down here for number 2. We've got pretty much, actually have to go out of November back to October to the 1,200 puts there. 1,200 puts are kind of the order of the day out here. They did about 7,000 in October as well. Again, the big day was Tuesday. Obviously, Tuesday was the hot put day out there. Again, with about 3,600 on Tuesday, 2,000 on Wednesday, and about 1,000 on Monday, about 500 today. Again, opening most days this week as well. So a lot of folks opening on 1,200 puts. Again, we're trending closer to that strike, so not entirely surprising. Then we go back here really quickly for number 3 to the November contract. We have 6,300 of the 1,300 puts. So those are actually in the money puts now, pretty active. Those are mostly closing throughout the week. The big weekday was obviously Tuesday there as well. 1,800 going up today, though, so no slouch today. And a lot of closing there. So some folks may be taking these 1,300 puts off as we blow through the strike. Again, not too surprising. And then probably reestablishing down there at the 1,200 strike, keeping their hedges alive, keeping their downside alive in soybeans as the ags continue to move lower. And speaking of continuing to move, it is time for us listeners to keep moving into your segment. It is time for the Futures Options Feedback.
It's time for your questions, comments, and insights. It's time for Futures Options Feedback. Submit your questions at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, stocktwits.com/optionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com. You can also submit your feedback via our Options Insider Radio Network mobile app, available for iOS, Android, and Kindle Fire devices. You can even ask your questions live via our Mixlr chat room. So grab the Mixlr app or just search for Options Insider at Mixlr.com. That's MIXLR.com.
All right, everybody, welcome to your feedback, the portion of the show where you guys ask us questions. We also turn the spotlight back on you. Really quickly, I want to pay off the poll we had last week that we were discussing on the show because the results are now in. We asked you this time last week. A lot of turbulence out there in the markets. What do you think is the main driver of this latest round of volatility? Gave you 4 choices: the Delta variant, Afghanistan, Fed tapering concerns, or market valuation concerns. Well, again, the results are now in. And we had almost 55%, 54.9% of you saying the Fed, followed by about 20% for the Delta variant, 14% almost for market valuation concerns, and about 12% for Afghanistan. This week, the question of the week is an intriguing one, if I do say so myself. Just a simple one, but also opens up to a lot of speculation and interesting discussion. We asked you guys very simply, which level do you think we will hit first? S&P of 4750, Bitcoin of 60,000, VIX of 13, or a gold of 2,000. Mr. Tim, if you want to weigh in with your choice, have at it. But more importantly, what do you think our audience is voting for right now, sir? Which of these product levels do they think we will hit first?
Oh, I don't know. I think my reaction, Bitcoin 60,000, I think is going to take it this week. I got a feeling. I don't know if they're going to be right, but I feel like that's the direction. I think that's where the crowd's going to take.
Well, certainly is a lot closer this week than it was this time last week. And you're pretty close, Tim, but that's actually a number 2. Our audience right now, by the way, listeners, if you haven't gotten in there, you have about a day left. It goes out at the close tomorrow there. So if you're listening after the fact, you still have time to vote. At Options is the place to go. S&P 4750 is leading the dance right now with nearly 50% of the vote, 47.4%, followed by your choice, Tim, Bitcoin of 60,000 with about 28.4%. And then VIX of 13, again, that one was a lot closer, even earlier this week than it is now, 15.8%, and gold of 8.4%. By the way, this is not just this week. This is just in general, whenever it happens, which of these will we hit first? So you have a vote. You agree, maybe you disagree with these results. Get out there at Options. Make your voice heard. By the way, Tim, I mentioned earlier, we have that one of our pro listeners there, Luigi. He mentioned he just opened and pulled the trigger on his futures account. So first off, congrats to you, Luigi. I know we've had a lot of listeners in the same boat. You're listening to this show. You're kind of getting intrigued by what's going on out there. You're checking out the TWIFO reports in between episodes. And I could see, if you're just sitting there doing equities, certainly there's a lot of meme stuff going on. You could trade your equities, but a lot of you want to get a little bit farther afield, see where the action is on the futures option side of the fence. So first off, congrats to Luigi and everyone else out there who's taken that step. It is a lot easier these days to just add a futures account to an equity account than it used to be. You used to have to do either go to a full-on FCM to do it, have a separate account at a separate firm, or it was a big pain. Now, these days, it's usually just hitting a couple of buttons at your existing broker. So that makes it a lot easier, which is good. And B, if you're thinking about taking the plunge, listeners, there you go. Congratulations to all of you out there who have done just that. But now he has the question, Tim. He has the seminal question. He says, I was hoping you guys could give me a track to head down. So where should he begin his futures options and indeed futures trading journey, Tim? I could tell you a lot of our pro listeners are coming from the equity and equity options side of the fence. So I have a feeling you might recommend he starts there. But what do you have to say for Luigi and everyone else, Tim, who's listening to the show? They're thinking about dipping their toes in futures and futures options. Where should they start?
I mean, that's a great question. Mark, as you suggest, I am obviously biased, but I'm an equity guy. And I would say starting the micro E-mini complex is a fantastic place to start, both on the futures and the options side. In terms of you're very familiar with the indices if you're trading in the cash equity markets. If you're already trading options on the other side of the fence in the cash side, whether it's ETF, single stock, or index options, very similar. And I think, I'll dare say it even better on the future side at CME with respect to being able to trade the futures and the options on futures alongside each other in terms of deploying hedge strategies as well as outright strategies. So I would say, start there. It's what you're familiar with. They're also hyper liquid, lots of great ways to get involved. And I think the other thing I'll say is it's not even just where to start with respect to trading. But we always like to remind listeners as you're starting your journey, whether you're thinking about opening the account or if you open the account, just like the listener Mark was describing, is education is key. There's never been more free education resources on the markets available at cmegroup.com. Anyone entertaining get involved in the market needs to be educated, needs to understand the risks, do your own homework. And we play an important role, and I think an outsized role in that, where we invest a lot in educational tools and resources and programs. And I would just really encourage everyone to check out those educational tools and resources. And when you're ready to take that first step and trade the products, I would just really recommend people to check out the micro E-mini contracts. I think that is the place to start, given their success to date and the liquidity they offer, as well as the familiarity. Everyone's very familiar with the equity market.
I can't argue with that. If you're coming from the equity side of the fence anyway, it's a no-brainer. Start in the equities. In particular, they have so many micros now. You don't have to worry about size anymore. We just broke down all the action on the S&P micro, so there is volume and liquidity to be found there, listeners. So yeah, if you're dipping your toes in the futures and futures options waters and you're coming from the equity markets already, it's a no-brainer. Start with the micros out there on, let's say, whatever index you like. If you like the S&P, that's the one we just broke down today. That's probably a good starting point for most of you out there. He also follows up, and I was thinking of heading into commodities as well. Maybe currencies. Do not start in the currencies, Luigi. Build to that. Start with the things you're familiar with. The currencies, very specific order flow out there. Not a lot of volume, not a lot of volatility. You get outside, as our other people in the chat have told you, once you get outside, the Euro USD and Pound USD, not a heck of a lot of paper to be found out there. So it's kind of, some appointment trading. You don't want to get stuck in that. Take your time, build to that. People always ask, what is something beyond the equities I should look at? And we've said it before, WTI has shape right now that is very similar from a skew perspective to what's going on in the equities. So you wouldn't be that lost from an overall skew position. We're seeing the puts bid, the calls offered. Vol a little bit more out there. You're in the 30s out there in WTI. So you get a little bit more bang for your buck out there. And it also is pretty liquid. And it's a product a lot of you tend to follow anyway. So it's not quite as esoteric as, let's say, a Euro USD. We have a lot of other things, a lot of other moving pieces that drive those ratios out there. And then we had Virginia on the show last week. I mean, I would probably take a little while to get acclimated to them. But once you understand the commodities space a little bit better, corn is very liquid. And, it does a lot of paper, and it has a skew that, again, the ag skew is going to be a little bit different than in the equities. So just bear that in mind. But if you're looking for products that have volatility and paper to them, then I would probably start obviously in the equities, but then probably energy. And then if you get comfortable with that, then you could probably maybe expand to like a corn or something like that, where you have liquidity, you have volume, everything else that you need out there. We're running up against it here, Tim. We got more listeners in the chat who want to get at you, including, who is that? Nichols. He wants to know, Tim, any altcoin on your radar right now? So I guess you can take it a couple of ways. You could take it from your CME product hat of, maybe here's some things out there that are interesting that we're keeping an eye on at CME. Maybe down the road, someday we can maybe do something with it. Or maybe even from your personal perspective, as you're watching these markets, these are the altcoin that are maybe just intriguing to you. So you can answer it however you want, Tim.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say right now at CME, we're focused on Bitcoin and Ether. The altcoin space is always interesting, intriguing, lots of, I think, interesting projects and assets coming online. But in terms of where we're focused on the institutional grade offering, as well as the regulatory front, we have a lot of certainty around Bitcoin and Ether. A lot of the altcoins don't have certainty with respect to who, is it a CFTC based futures product, security? There's lots of questions around what are they still. So until some of that gets answered, it's hard for us to bring product without that regulatory certainty. Where the CFTC has cleanly said that Bitcoin and Ether are a commodity in their jurisdiction. So we'll have to wait for some clarity, but I think lots of interesting things, lots of innovative spaces. And I'll just remind listeners to keep an eye on, it's not just the futures products that we have in crypto. We also work with our partner crypto facilities, CF Benchmarks, in bringing reference rates and indices. So you're likely to see more innovative stuff on the index front or the reference rate side of the fence first with respect to some of the other assets and tokens that are out there. You'll see that first before we get into the futures, just because of the regulatory issues that we have to deal with in bringing the products to market.
So, Tim, if I can read between the lines there, what I'm hearing is no Doge. That's what I'm hearing.
That's right. I mean, unless someone puts it out in all caps in crypto Twitter, but kidding aside, yeah, no Dogecoin anytime soon for us here at CME.
All right, everybody. Sorry. No Doge for you at CME right now, but there's a lot of altcoin to pay attention to. And I get it, Tim. The regulatory space is, I think, to put it mildly, fluid on the crypto side. So look at what's going on with XRP and all these ones you guys want to trade and ask about all the time. Very fluid out there. So interesting space, certainly one to watch. Unfortunately, that music means we've come to the end of another excellent sojourn through the world of futures options. By the way, I got to say, I love seeing you guys over there in the pro chat, helping each other. That's fantastic, giving you ideas for what to trade and where things are more liquid. I love that. So if you haven't checked it out yet, listeners, you're missing out on a pretty cool secret club over there, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Get in there. It's not just me and the guests talking. You guys are all helping each other out, which we love to see. Theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Just gave away a new pro trading crate this morning to one of our pro listeners. So we love doing that stuff. Check it out. And of course, you can get in there and join the conversation, which is always fun. And Mr. Tim, if they have more questions about what's cooking in the land of equities or indeed crypto, maybe they want to reach out to you guys, or maybe they just want to learn more, where should they go? What should they do, Tim?
Always a great question. I wanted to send everyone the best resource is our website, cmegroup.com. Tons of educational resources, tons of information. Also follow CME Group on Twitter at CME Group. We also have the Active Trader handle at CME Group, at Active Trader CME. So lots of things to look at, lots of great resources, and you can just reach out to myself, reach out to the team, get in touch with us through the website. Always happy to help, but the website's a great place to start, cmegroup.com for sure.
Kind of hard to go wrong with cmegroup.com. And of course, while you're there, cmegroup.com/TWIFO. TWIFO is the place to go to get our reports. And of course, you know where to go to get all the latest data on all things small cap, the analysis, the volatility, the different sectors within. They have that cool COVID-19 impact hub that's got just tons of information about how COVID-19 is impacting the equity space and a whole bunch more. FTSE Russell, FTSE Russell.com is the place to go for that. Give them a follow on the old Twitters while you're at it. At FTSE Russell is the place to go for all the data they're tweeting out in between episodes of this show. And of course, that's it for us today, but we'll be back again tomorrow noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern for volatility views. Then back again for everybody in the Secret Club, 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern for options oddities. Then we have a new week on our hands. Of course, a shortened holiday week, so no shows on Monday. But we're back again next Thursday for another episode of TWIFO. We'll see you then.
This Week in Futures Options is brought to you by CME Group, the world's leading and most diverse futures and options exchange. CME Group's markets help individuals and businesses around the world manage risks and seize opportunities. CME Group offers the deepest and most liquid options on futures across all asset classes, including interest rates, equity indexes, foreign exchange, energy, agriculture, and metals. For more information and educational resources about futures options at CME Group, visit cmegroup.com/options. This Week in Futures Options is also brought to you by FTSE Russell, a leading global provider of benchmarks, analytics, and data solutions. Investors in the U.S. and around the world are using FTSE Russell indexes to benchmark their investment performance and create investment funds, ETFs, structured products, and index-based derivatives. Many Options Insider Radio Network listeners will be familiar with the Russell 2000 Index. Russell 2000 futures and options are currently trading on the Chicago Board Options Exchange and CME Group. For more information, please visit ftserussell.com, cboe.com, and cmegroup.com. This broadcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute trading advice or the solicitation of purchases or sale of any futures or options. The rulebook of the applicable exchange should be consulted as the authoritative source on all current contract specifications. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.